I was very intrigued by your story about the Society of Charles the Martyr. It sounds like a great thing to be a member of, but how can a Catholic join an Anglican devotional society? I guess part of my confusion comes with my lack of understanding about Anglo-Catholicism. To me, it's either Catholic or not.
Well, I agree with you. It is Catholic or not. But what does that actually mean, practically speaking? I will give you an example from life. I knew a lady, a Serbian Orthodox lady, who was a convinced believer, although she was a practicing Serbian Orthodox, a convinced believer in the supremacy of the Pope and the existence of purgatory, which an Orthodox is not supposed to believe in. At the same time, I've known of a cardinal who apparently didn't believe in transubstantiation and whose diocese was in material schism from Rome while he reigned over it. You're either Catholic or you're not. Absolutely. Which of these two is Catholic?
Well, aren't these two exceptions to the rule?
Well, they're not exceptions at all. The rule is the rule. Which is Catholic, which is not. One of them believes everything the Church teaches, the other does not.
I mean, most Orthodox in name do not subscribe to the beliefs that lady had.
That's correct. But a lot of them do.
Okay, so is Society of Charles the Martyr like that?
Well, I'm setting the prequel.
Okay.
I'm setting the prequel. So I go back. Who is the Catholic? Who is the schismatic? The Czech or the Cardinal?
Well.
Well, indeed.
Okay.
You don't want to say it, I won't make it. I'll say it.
You say
She
it.
was, he wasn't. I mean, the truth of the matter is, you are one thing or the other. You're in the church or you're not. But when it's in the area of schism, as opposed to heresy, especially when there's nothing juridically marking you out as a schismatic, it becomes very much a question of where your brain's at, if you have one.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, modern people often we don't need to. We've been exempted from that by Almighty God. Now,
well, they have one. Just it's very small. The brainstem.
Yeah, the little brainstem, and then they've got the big So, as far as the Society of King Charles the Martyr goes, the next question is, of course, what are Anglo-Catholics? And it is a big, non-monolithic movement. But before we even talk about them, we got to talk about King Charles.
Okay.
Now, King Charles was, so far as one can tell, outwardly speaking, not a member of the Catholic Church. Yet, he wrote to several popes his belief in all the dogmas that they themselves, they being the popes in question, believed in, including their spiritual supremacy.
Mm.
He didn't believe in their power to depose kings, which is not a matter of Catholic dogma anyway.
That's interesting.
He venerated the Virgin Mary. He was baptized. He negotiated for reunion with Rome, and that's one of the reasons the Puritans killed him.
Okay.
So, the question as to whether or not King Charles was a Catholic or was not, you have to look at various things. He said when he died, that I die a member of the Church of England as I received it from my father. But we know that people of his time, when they wanted to show they were anti-Roman, called themselves Protestant, which he never did. Instead, assuring Pope after Pope that he himself was a Catholic in the same sense that they were.
Okay.
It's a pretty weird situation, isn't it?
Well, that's interesting. It's definitely a gray area. I mean, I'll play devil's advocate and say, he says he's a member of the Church of England. Wouldn't that be a strike against the creed, one holy apostolic church? He's saying he's a part of a different church.
Except that as far as he was concerned, the Church of England was part of the Catholic Church.
Okay. Oh, that's complicated then.
It's very complicated, which is why at the end of the day, what one has to do is pray that Rome will one day resolve it.
Yeah.
And that, but the problem is Rome never resolves anything unless people are after her to resolve something.
Well, like everything else, to be honest.
Else. And Rome has other things that are probably more important to her at the moment. I'll give you an example. Charles's grandson, James II, his cause for canonization was opened.
Mm-hmm.
There are miracles. But then the French Revolution came along.
Uh-oh.
And suddenly the Holy See was busy with other stuff.
Distracted.
Yeah, distracted. And it was never picked up again after the Revolution. But one day, please God, it'll be resolved. Of course, the only way that would happen is if a group of people began to press for its being resolved. What you can't do is turn around and say, oh, you mustn't press to have the issue resolved, because that wouldn't be Catholic.
Ah, I see.
You see, if you're going to say, well, you can't advance the proposition. Well, no. If you don't advance the proposition, it won't get answered.
Okay.
A definitive judgment on the case of Charles I is only possible by the Pope. But that will never happen unless people ask the question. Unless people advance the proposition. Can I tell you that Charles I is a Catholic saint? No, any more than I could tell you any servant of God is.
Okay. Yeah, I see. So we don't know, but we're going to press the Pope, and he will make the judgment. It's not. In other words, it's not on us.
No. But none of these causes ever go anywhere unless somebody pushes them.
Interesting.
Of course, then, if they finally definitively rule, nah.
But we don't want to risk being wrong, because that's embarrassing.
If that were the case, since we're usually wrong,
What?
we should probably never set foot outside our houses.
Ah.
Stay home, everyone. Don't go outside. Now, to answer your question as to how... Now, it gets a little bit more interesting, though. Because when Pope Benedict XVI created the Anglican Ordinariates, he wanted them specifically to preserve what he called the Anglican patrimony for the Catholic Church.
What does that mean?
That's exactly what we are in the process of developing. Right now as we speak, the Anglican Ordinariates are living out their lives trying to answer exactly that question. Part of it's liturgical. Because unlike the majority of the Latin Rite, that liturgically speaking, well, as Pope Benedict put it, where there's applause at Mass, the spirit of the liturgy is fled.
Yeah.
What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? Is there applause at most Masses? Oh, I know we're Catholic and we can't ever be honest. I know. I know. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The solemnity that you will find in the Anglican Ordinariate at their liturgy is part of that patrimony we want to preserve. The theological patrimony, the devotional patrimony, and this brings us to the question of the devotional societies, unless you thought I was simply rambling pointlessly. Not that I'm incapable of rambling pointlessly. Some of you have seen me do it. What? That's true, I can.
Yeah.
You've seen me do it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, remember first and foremost, what is an Anglo-Catholic? An Anglo-Catholic is a member of a wing of Anglicanism that developed in the 19th century, although it claims roots further back. First and foremost, Henry VIII, as we know, breaks from Rome. Now, Henry does not decide, he does not want to start a new Protestant church. He wants a Catholic church that will do what he wants. Kind of like Louis XIV and other people like that.
Yeah.
Who came later. But he doesn't get his way with the Pope. So he declares himself the supreme governor of the Church of England. Well, He doesn't change the teachings. He doesn't even change the Mass much. But then he dies. And all of the Protestants who had, like Cranmer, who had flattered him, they take over the show. Edward VI is a boy. He's trained to be a good Protestant. Cranmer, in 1549, brings out the first Book of Common Prayer, which is an English version of the Sarum use of the Latin Mass. Slightly Protestantized, but only slightly. A few years later, he brings out the 1552 book, much more Protestantized.
Yeah.
And then the following year, of course, Edward dies. Queen Mary comes back. Cranmer gets burned like a little crispy critter, as we used to say when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
The church is reestablished for a few years. She dies. Elizabeth is accepted as queen on the proviso that she'll maintain the Marian settlement. She doesn't. And renews the Church of England. And it's really under Elizabeth that the Church of England became what we think of as the Church of England. Because you've got three different currents in it. You've got the very Protestant types, the Puritans and all that. You've got the very Catholicizing type who want to be Catholic and everything but the Pope. And then you've got the middle of the roaders who are, just happy with whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those three have characterized Anglican life from that time to this. But under Elizabeth, died without an heir, without a child anyway. So it went to her murdered cousin's son, James I. James VI of Scotland, first of England, fellow who gave us the King James Bible, of which the best thing I've ever heard was, well, the King James Bible is good enough for Jesus Christ, good enough for me. Damn straight. What?
That's amazing.
I thought so. He had nothing quite like historical knowledge, and that was nothing quite like historical knowledge.
Yeah.
Anyway, so James, who married a Catholic, was Anne of Denmark, but under whom a number of Catholics were murdered, especially because of the gunpowder plot. The Guy Fawkes and his friends tried to blow up the king in Parliament, and their reaction was not optimal to this.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have to say, too, that movie, V for Vendetta, that manages to use Guy Fawkes as a symbol of freedom without ever pointing out that he died for his religion. It's a little bit like a documentary on Martin Luther King that leaves out the whole race issue.
Yeah.
You'd say, well, yeah, but what was the deal? Well, he was for freedom.
Okay.
Anyway, so what should happen but that James dies, his son Charles becomes king. Now Charles is married to a Catholic, Henrietta Marie of France. His two oldest sons, of course, will both die Catholic. He had begun negotiations with Rome in the 1620s, even before he was king. This was held out against him later at his trial.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to his, I'll get there. So he decides he wants to Catholicize the Church of England. Now, by this time, you've got to understand the Church of England had become very Protestant. Very Protestant. But he believes in the real presence, which most people don't. He believes in the intercession of the saints, the Virgin Mary, which most people do at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So he appoints this guy, Archbishop Laud, who was no great friend of the Pope's, I can tell you, to Catholicize the Church of England. And he begins to do so. And ritual, candles back on the altar rails back, eastward facing, all that kind of stuff. So much so that the Pope offers Laud the red hat.
Okay.
Now Laud's the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah.
But the Pope offers him the red hat.
Okay.
To be a cardinal.
Right, yeah, I understand.
Now, number one, he couldn't have done that without Charles's permission. Laud laughingly refuses it.
Okay.
But the understanding of the ecclesiology of the Church of England on the part of Rome at that time was different to ours now. You see what I'm saying? The distinctions were not nearly so clear.
Yeah. I understand.
So, And that's why they're much clearer now. If I, as a member of the Church of England, with my Bishopess of London
Yeah.
and all that stuff, if I tell you I'm a Catholic,
Yeah.
that's one thing. Back then,
Yeah.
it's a little...
Strange organic process.
Exactly. By which this dissolution became greater and greater and greater and greater. Once again, it's like with the Eastern Orthodox. In truth, that system has no legal existence. Not anymore. And so when you start looking into that, when you look into the saints that the Holy See has allowed us to venerate post-schism, when you look at Pius IX inviting the Eastern Orthodox patriarchs to participate in Vatican I as full participants, it gets really strange and gooey. And I would be lying if I told you that I had any straight answer to it either. But if you're not going to get one out of the Pope, don't look at it from me. At any rate, so Charles I inherits with the throne a number of priests in jail. So what does he do? Does he pardon them? No. He felt this politically would be a little difficult to do. What he does do is he lets them go visit their flocks during the day and come back to the prisons at night. So it's sort of like running a rest home for priests. But as we know, he ran out of money. He fought the war with the Scots. He called Parliament back into session after having done without Parliament for 11 years. And the Long Parliament, as it's called, takes over and not only executes all the Catholic priests in jail, it executes William Laud, the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Wow.
And his Charles's major helper, Strafford. So, I mean, if he wasn't able to save Laud, and he wasn't able to save Strafford, it's a little much to think he was going to be able to save any Catholic martyrs.
Yeah.
And then he raises his banner at Nottingham. He goes to war. And all the Catholics in his kingdoms rally behind him against Cromwell. And of course, eventually he's defeated. They have a kangaroo court trial. He's offered his life if he'll consent to the abolition of bishops in the Church of England. He refuses. Hence his point that he died a member of the Church of England as it was given him by his father.
I see.
See, if you look at this stuff outside of context, it's easy to draw a quick conclusion. All right, so that's the end of him. You have the whole Stuart adventure, then the Hanoverians, and by the early 19th century, the Church of England is, shall we say, very Protestant. But then something funny happens. The Romantic movement, and Sir Walter Scott. And also, because of the French Revolution, you had a lot of English, Scots, and Irish Catholic institutions that had been in exile for 300 years come back to England, Scotland, and Ireland. So once again, you've got convents, you've got Catholic schools and all that, which you hadn't had in centuries. And the result of all this ferment was what was called the Oxford movement. The Oxford movement was led by two men. A man named John Henry Newman and a man by the name of Pusey. I think Edward Bouverie Pusey, I think. I may be wrong. Anyway, so Pusey and Newman were the ringleaders. And the idea of the Oxford movement was that they would re-Catholicize the Church of England. And that was the start of Anglo-Catholicism. Now eventually Newman and a lot of his supporters figured this isn't going to go anywhere. They became Catholic directly. But a lot of them didn't feel that way. And they continued what was called Anglo-Catholicism. Now, in doing so, they did a lot of stuff. They produced reams and reams of very solid theological work and republications and retranslations of medieval English Catholic stuff. They created a liturgy that was very like the Tridentine Mass in English. Because their priests were very unpopular among the Anglican bishops, so they get stuck in slums. And they would go to work building these beautiful churches in the slums and all that. And, processions and high masses in utter dumps. And these were called the Slum Priests. There had not been a great deal of interest in evangelizing the non-whites in the British Empire before this. But you had orders of Anglo-Catholics founded, and they went out to convert the heathen.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very peculiar time. All of that is part of the so-called Anglican patrimony, this history. Now, there was more to it, and that was what were called the Anglican devotional societies. Because what did they say? Real Catholics do what? They don't believe in the real presence, but they adore the Blessed Sacrament as God Himself. So that was the foundation of something called the Confraternity of the Blessed Sacrament, which is dedicated to just that.
Mm.
Well, Catholics pray to Our Lady. That was the origin of the Society of Mary. They pray for the dead, and thus you have the Guild of All Souls. Now, about 1859, Charles I, who had been canonized by the Anglicans after Cromwell was gotten rid of and Charles I became king, they canonized him.
Okay.
Now, the only one they've ever done that to. But in 1859, his day was removed from the Book of Common Prayer. So the same sort of people that had established all these other societies thought that was terrible, and we need to bring back the devotion to Charles I, who was both a defender of the apostolic succession and, for some anyway, not all of them saw them this way, a pioneer of unity between England and Rome. And so the Society of King Charles the Martyr was born. This is all in the 19th century. Okay, so what do we have? Well, fast forward to the present. Anglo-Catholicism became a big movement. It probably had its apogee immediately before, during, and after World War II. It became a big, big, big thing. And then it began to fall apart. Now, there had always been two strands in it. Those who felt that their job would not be complete until all of Anglicanism was reunited with the Catholic Church under the Pope. And those who felt, no, we don't need the Pope. We're Catholic as we are. Those two tendencies were always like that.
Mm.
Anglicanism as a whole began to crumble theologically in the 1960s, the same time that we did. And the crumbling went a lot further, though. I mean, imagine someone like some of our current leadership in charge since the 60s. That kind of mindset.
Mm.
And that gives you a taste of what the Anglicans went through. Well, pardon me, ladies and gentlemen, this is a little rude, but the back of my neck hurts. So there you are. I'm human. I bleed. It's true, like Shylock.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I hope all this story is making sense to you.
It is.
All right. So, what finally happened was that when the Pope, Benedict XVI, decreed that as groups of Anglicans had come to the Holy See asking for a refuge, as it were, because what they'd come to understand was that it wasn't simply a question of view or opinion, but a question of ecclesiology and authority. He recognized that they had either preserved from the Middle Ages or reinvented or started anew a lot of things that were of value to the Catholic Church, and particularly the Latin Church as it is now, since it's become, and he was certainly the first to say, a liturgical and devotional wasteland. When the Pope said the vast majority of Catholics are liturgically and doctrinally illiterate, this was not a compliment.
Okay.
All right. One thing that the Anglicans had coming with them in the church is a very fine tradition of scholarship, amongst other things. So all of this stuff is part of the Anglican patrimony. And with it, the whole purpose of the ordinariates is severalfold. One, partly to provide a home to those Anglicans coming into the church and other English-speaking Protestants. Secondly, to preserve all that's good in the Anglican patrimony for the use of the Catholic Church as a whole. And thirdly, to assist in the conversion of the Anglosphere. Because, over the several centuries, Catholicism has become to seem for a lot of English speakers very foreign, very alien. It's not, but that's how it seems.
Yeah.
And the ordinariates and the sort of Anglo-Catholicism they represent may very well be precisely the kind of thing to bring these folk into the church.
I remember you said in Star Spangled Crown, in your Star Spangled Crown verse, that the ordinariates swallow up a lot of Protestantism, and bring them into the Catholic Church. And I think I asked you this in person, and you said that's because the ordinariates understand Protestantism and they care about the Protestants in a way where perhaps cradle Catholics don't really care about.
No, well, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't believe in evangelizing.
Yeah.
I mean, and when I say that, I don't mean to say that we sit around saying we don't believe in it and they can all fry in hell. First, we don't believe they will fry in hell. We don't believe they need to be Catholic. We don't believe there's any necessity to be Catholic. Of course, as Benedict XVI has said, that takes away any reason to be Catholic, and it takes away any reason to try to evangelize. So we're prisoners of the theological false trail we've been down for a long time. But what you find with the people of the ordinariates is that they're very much believers in the necessity of the church. And they are very keen to bring as many of their own into the church as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We should feel that way. The fact that we don't reflects badly on us.
Yeah.
See, we're the problem children. And, we were taught this. And it's one reason why, because the salvation of souls is no longer an interest of ours, it's why so many of our clergy have become God's bureaucrats. With no real care, apparently, for the souls of their faithful, because it's just not on their menu.
Yeah.
So, anyway, my last point in all this is that as far as the Anglo-Catholic devotional societies go, the ones I mentioned in particular, I would assert that they have no real future outside the ordinariates.